Namaskar, Subhrabhat, good morning. I welcome all of you. I welcome our Honorable Chancellor Sir, our Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, our esteemed guests, dignitaries, all students, and all faculty and teaching staff also. In this auspicious event, we have with us our Honorable Chancellor Shri Sanjeev Sanyal Sir and our Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Umar Kant Sir. I invite both of them to please be on the stage and occupy their chairs, sir. Please. Thank you, sir. And in the very beginning of this event, I request one of our senior faculties, Dr. Jayanti Kazale Madam, to offer a bouquet and greet and welcome Honorable Chancellor Sir as well as Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir. Kazale Madam, please. This part of the function or this part of the ceremony is kind of bit informal or let's say informally formal, and so without wasting any much time on formal uh, protocols of the function, I straightway would like to request our chancellor sir to guide all of us.
Good morning, friends. How are you doing today? Good? Yeah, koi josh hi nahi hai. How are you doing today? Good? Okay. Acha, there is a lot of backbenches there. I know you're trying to will want to slink out, but there are seats in front if you want them. So, we meet here again at the beginning of another academic cycle. And this is a time of change in multiple ways, as you will see. So let me first of all begin by thanking our interim Vice Chancellor, Professor Shankar Das, who's not here. But he played a very important role last year. As many of you know, the institution did go through certain amount of turbulence. Those of you who were there last year will remember all of that. But Professor Das then played an important role in stabilizing the institution, making sure that the day-to-day activities of the institution carried on. And so I would say that uh, from all our side, I would like to thank him, even though he couldn't be here with us today. Next, very important, let me welcome our new Vice Chancellor, Professor Umar Kant. He joins us from IRMA, where he had long distinguished career. We have managed to get him here with due permission from his alma mater, or not the correct word, but from IIT Madras, who is his sort of home base. But we will have him here for 5 years, and it will be an interesting time. As you will see, I've already had a couple of days of discussion with him, and we have lots of exciting things cooking for both the students and the faculty. So the reason that this is an interesting time for an institution like ours is, of course, not only that there are all things that are happening inside our institution or even in our country, but because this is actually a very sort of turbulent time in many other ways as well. The job market, the education field, and many other areas of human endeavor are going to be upended by artificial intelligence. All of you know that. Anybody who has any access to a computer in the last 1 year would have seen how dramatically things are already beginning to change. Many of you, when you have a question in your mind, probably simply open up Grok or Perplexity or OpenAI and type out your question and get some sort of an answer. So the way we deal with thinking about information, you don't even do what we used to do a few years ago. Go into Google, pull out their list and choose. And now it is even chosen for us. And it does such a good job, frankly, for 99% of the time. Looking for information is become incredibly simple. Now, this doesn't mean that education ends here. It does mean that we have to adapt to a situation and move up the value chain where simply rote learning information is no longer useful. Um, uh, Information is freely available at the fingertips of anybody. You don't even have to be an expert to understand fairly advanced levels of many areas of study. So, therefore, one of the things that we at JIPE have to do is that and this is not just JIPE, but the university world will have to do, is to move into areas where you are given the tools to be able to use artificial intelligence as a way of going to the next level rather than being wiped out by artificial intelligence. So technology in the end is a poor master, but it's a good slave. And so, but in order to be a master to that slave, you have to have certain amount of decision making capability and real life abilities. And to that effect, we are now going to introduce a bunch of things. I'm going to read out a few of them, but there are more that will be panned out. So here is one example of how we hope to get our students, but maybe the faculty would like to join in this as well, to get essentially an experiential forms of learning. So the first thing that we're going to do is to introduce a student-led shadow monetary policy committee. So what will it do? So as all of you know, you're all economics students. Every year, at least 6 times, the monetary policy committee meets and they look at data and they decide how our monetary policy will be conducted. So what we will do is we will create a student-led monetary policy committee for each one of them so that we give enough students. PhD or master's levels, final year master's level student will be made the chairman. It'll have 6 more members chosen from either the final year bachelors or from masters. And they will be asked a few weeks before each monetary policy committee to actually function like a monetary policy committee. So we'll expect you to formally write out what your opinion is based on the data, inflation data, all other economic data, growth, etc. What you would vote if you were a member of the monetary policy committee in reality, what you would vote. Would you want a rate cut, rate release, increase in liquidity, whatever it is you have to do. And in writing, you have to justify it. Just like if you look at the Monetary Policy Committee, they justify it. A few days after the Monetary Policy Committee announcements on monetary policy, they actually make public the opinions of each one. So you will have to write it out. And by doing this, what will happen? You will be forced to understand the mental processes that lead to such decision making. You have to understand that a policymaker myself may have lots of information, but even then, I'm essentially, this information is like a drop in the ocean of uncertainty. I'm making these decisions and making all kinds of guesswork about how the world will pan out in future. If I'm good, maybe I will get it right more times than I will get it wrong. But this is something that no artificial intelligence can do. They also cannot see into the future. So this ability to take decisions under uncertainty is something you must taste. So after you have done this process, hopefully completed a few days before the actual MPC, this student shadow MPC policy will be made public And maybe we can do a presentation on this. And then we will see how you do compared to the actual MPC when it comes out a few days later. More importantly, we will gauge whether or not what you said turned out, how it turned out into the future. Who knows? Maybe you will outperform what the actual MPC does. I don't know, but it will be a good experience. And we will do this 6 times. So 7 members, one chairman plus 6 members, and 6 times a year. So 7 into 6 times 6 numbers of students will be able to participate through the course of the year. And over a period of time, during your time, most of you, or at least a good proportion of you, will have actually gone through this experience. I think it will be a good experience. Next, we are going to introduce a new course. This will be a course in process reforms. It will be an elective for all MA streams. And this, we are going to launch it today, and I'm going to actually deliver the first lecture on it personally. By the way, I hope you've got my presentation loaded. And the idea here is, again, to take you through the mental processes of actually doing reforms. You all read about news in newspapers, reform, structural reform, process reform, etc. But you have to understand that those who are doing these reforms are just a little few years older than you. And in only a little bit more time in the future, you will be having to do this. So we want you to go through the process of problem solving, because that is again something that artificial intelligence and no amount of technology is going to get rid of. There'll always be problems to solve. And we want you to first see the case studies of those who have come before you, judge whether they did a good job or a bad job, but very importantly, begin to think about how problems need to be solved. This is important because, again, just like with the MPC project, it's all very good to look back and look at the history of how people did whatever they did. Do remember that all those people were also functioning under uncertainty. They were also taking a chance. Every problem solving is an act of entrepreneurship and risk taking. So you need to go through it yourself, or at least go through that, understand this. So this course on process reforms will be made available as an elective to MA, and maybe if it's very successful, we'll begin to introduce it bachelor's level as well. We'll see. But the idea here is again to give you that experience. Finally, let me say that there will be a new program. We are introducing a BSc in economics and data science. This is again very much oriented towards experience, because it will be an apprenticeship based system with a very strong element of trying to get you again to dirty your hands. Just because artificial intelligence runs data doesn't mean that's the end of data science and AI does all the work for you. You need to know the first principles. As I said, all these things are tools, but to be able to use them as slaves, you need to understand the first principles. So here we will not only teach you the theory, but a big effort is being made, and I'm trying to see if we can tie up here with industry, with maybe with NSE, BSE, and the stock market people, and so on. And the idea again is to be able to give you hands-on experience to see what is the in what way all the tools that you learn are actually used in live marketplace. So as you can see, you can clearly see the orientation of JIPE courses, where it is going. It is of course, we will still be making you study all the old stuff. We are not letting you off from that. But of course, more and more of this can now be done before you come to the classroom, so that you participate in the more experiential part. I'm sure the faculty will also find it more interesting. They can involve you more in their research than repetitive lecturing. So this is where we are as far as academia is concerned. In addition to this, as a part of the entire experiential conception of education, one of the things that I felt strongly about, and I talked to some of the other members of the top management of the institution, I feel strongly that all of you come from across the country to study at Gokhale Institute. But of course, Gokhale Institute does not exist in vacuum. It exists in a city called Pune, in a state called Maharashtra, which has a very rich history and a rich culture. But there is nothing hardwired in the way Gokhale Institute works, which gives you an immersion into the city that you all call home for these 3 years. Some of you, of course, are from here, but many of you, maybe the majority, are not from Pune. So there are a couple of things I'm going to announce here, and I will need here the students in particular to tell me whether they will participate in this, because this is only going to work if you participate in this. So the first thing I'm going to say is that we are going to try and create a Dhol Tasha band. Good idea? Yeah. Now some of you are from Maharashtra, from Pune. The idea is that everybody who goes through this institution for the 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, whatever you spend here, should at least have had a go at the drum. You may not become experts. I don't expect you to all become great musicians, but I think you should know the sound. It should be something you remember when you go away. And so here I need the help of those of you who are locals and know how to do this whole thing, including the chanting part, to teach your classmates and colleagues how to do this. Because as I said, long years from now, you may not remember many other things about it, but these are the experiences you will remember. So part of the experiential experience of Gokhale Institute should be to experience this phenomena. I have already spoken to the Honorable Member of Parliament from Pune. He's also quite excited about it. He said he will try and arrange some drums, etc. But I think we will try and get a few of them so that you can bang them and make a big racket. And not in class hours, please. But maybe in the evening. But the idea is that, you know, you learn, and maybe we'll get you some people to demo the full range. But the idea you do this. And the similar idea, I'm trying to set up a talim or an akhada with traditional style gymnasium in the hostel area. We have already identified the space. The idea is to give you an experience of a big tradition in Maharashtra, especially in Pune, of this, of basically Malkham, Gada training, Mudgar. These are the traditional ways in which training used to happen. And yes, also wrestling. Okay. Now, I know mud wrestling may not be everybody's taste, so we will upgrade it to mats. But it will be traditional in the sense it is called Malla Yuddha. It is different from Olympic style wrestling. It is more like MMA, in case those of you who watch UFC. And we will try and do it in a way, we'll try and do it in a way. Those who want to take it at an advanced level is one thing, but those who just want to experience using a gada, mudgar, you don't have to really get into the mat, but actually see what it is about. This is, as I said, the talim. They're called they're called akhadas or kaladi and various gutka, etc. in different parts of the country. In this part of the country, they're called talims. There are still some good traditional talims in Pune. Of course, those of you who are really into it will probably want to go to Kolhapur, but we'll see how that goes. But we have found a space in the hostel area, and we'll try and create a shelter, and then hopefully I will come and at least take some classes in that myself, since I do it myself. So with that, let me stop because we have many other things to discuss. Let me get Umar Kant to say a few words. Over to you.
Uh, Respected Chancellor, uh, colleagues, esteemed colleagues, dear students, alumni, and Gokhale community. I think we all are excited listening to our Chancellor, are we not? Yes. I think we are going to see some of the things, whether it is the student club on monetary policy or to improve the co-curricular, extracurricular curricular activities that the students are going to go through. Uh, I think let me just thank at outset. As I stand before you today with a deep sense of with a deep sense of humility, pride, and responsibility, which as I take the position of Vice Chancellor at Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, which of course is known for its standing, known for its legacy, known for its history, and an institution which has established itself as a research institute, training and participating in the economics and social policy at the national and international level. Uh, at the outset, I would like to thank Chancellor Saab, the selection committee, and the entire community for having trust on me. And as already chancellors have told, the kind of effort extra we have to go out of the way to get me here, because IIT Madras was not letting me to go after my first period of deputation at IRMA, because I was wanted at IIT Madras. But then, thanks to Chancellor and the entire management, with their effort, with their nudging, I could be. I'm here and I'm standing in front of you. So basically, when we see the legacy of Gopal Krishna Gokhale, the kind of education importance thirst that is being given, and the kind of environment that is maintained at JAIB, I think we have it's a highly accomplished. Of course, it's endowed with not just legacy, but it is endowed with highly accomplished faculty members, curious students, willing to learn economics and how economics functions and how social theories work when we talk about the development of the country, be it the state or be the country. And we have a very wonderful ecosystem. So the thing is, how are we going to make the ecosystem much vibrant, and how are we going to make the ecosystem much stronger, so that not only research, student life and everything thrive where innovations. I think this is the era of startup and innovations. How are we going to, of course, we do talk about entrepreneurship. I think as economics faculties, always we talk about entrepreneurship. Now, how that entrepreneurship, what we teach in book can be translated into by giving hand-holding experience to the students so that they can go and try in the market, and some of them will succeed, some of them will fail, doesn't matter. But what again highlighted by the chancellor is the process that is more important, experiencing the process. Some may fail, some may succeed, doesn't matter, but even if they fail, they are going to learn a lot from the process that they have experienced while spending some time during the startup. So again, being influenced by the philosophy of Gokhaleji, I think we should see education not just as a personal development, but we should see as a vehicle for the social development and the development growth of the country. That's when the teaching and learning is going to be complete. And this is not possible without the support, without the collaboration. So I think the next couple of months I'm going to spend to understand the perspective, which I've already started talking to students, talking to faculties, and talking to the stakeholders, so that we have to take everybody along when we are taking any decision that is good for the system. Because today's world, what is more important is the information. It's time and information. And again, we have to develop the courses, as rightly pointed out, which are not just theoretical, but we have to experience. We have to live with the theories, the education that we are imparted or that are being imparted at JAIB. Uh, so basically, what it requires is a collaborative effort from the faculty side, effort from the student side, effort from the institute, and effort from, of course, the other stakeholders. Wherever possible, we are going to bring. So the 30 years of experience, when I started as a research scholar at IIT Kanpur, and then, of course, my initial phases at Vispilani and later IIT Madras and IRMA. So I can assure I have understood the value of the education, of course, the research, scholarship. But apart from the education or scholarship, what is more important is the role of institution in transforming the ecosystem. The kind of energy, the kind of power, or the kind of capacity the institutions has to mobilize, to transform, to lead is what we need to explore and expedite and strengthen. So I think in order to do that, what we need to do, of course, again, we have already started by introducing a couple of courses which are going to be cutting edge, because we have to keep in mind the requirement or the need of the market, because we can't, we have to adapt to the market, and we have to understand the new expectations, new emerging trends, and the requirements of the market so that we stay relevant. That's more important. Of course, we will be teaching economics, but how that economics is going to be more relevant for the students to understand, to unpack the theories that are being introduced or the interventions that are being done in the market or by the government. And that is also going to help them for finding jobs, because at the end of the day, that is what that matters. So we are going to bring, of course, it's there, but we are going to make it more rigor by embedding the experience. That is what was reflected, and that was what was highlighted by even Honorable Chancellor. So we will make it more experiential, wherever possible, live projects, because that's what we do when whether it was IIT Madras or IRMA, collaborating with the market, collaborating with the industry, collaborating with the other stakeholders, so that it's going to be a continuous flow of knowledge from the industry, from the government, from the market to the institution, and vice versa. So we have to take advantage of that, being in Pune, being close to the financial capital of the country, Mumbai. I think that's not going to be a big challenge. Second, of course, there are some institutional mechanisms. So we have to strengthen institutional innovations, be it governance, strong governance, because those are the pillars for the success of any academic institution, or for that matter, any institution. We have to make it transparent. We have to bring good governance practices, not only what we have practiced or what we are practicing, but also we can get good practices from other academic institutions, from other corporate world, so that it is going to be a strong and vibrant ecosystem, again, to everyone thrive. The third one is the stakeholder engagements as much as possible. We will be having a close interaction with stakeholders, the corporate world, the government, so that every month or so, every now and then, there has to be some kind of talks, workshops, so that no, not only we learn from them, but that we also give back what we are doing in during or in terms of our research or other deliberations. And last but not the least, again, we have to be socially relevant. So whatever we are doing, whether it is teaching or research or other kind of academic activities, should be aligned with, should have, or it should be aligned with the mission and vision of the institution, and the direction and trajectory the government and the country has taken. So it's like what we have been telling, Sehkar se Samriddhi. So the prosperity will come through cooperation. So I think that's what we are going to work towards. And to become, again, what our Honorable Prime Minister says, by 2047, that's the target which is given to us, to become a developed economy. I think as an academic institution, we have to give back and give away a lot of things, and not only in contribution of the policy, uh, analysis of the policy, because what is more important is doing a kind of assessments, a kind of what works and what doesn't work, and how to make it more effective and efficient. Because what is more important is effectiveness and efficiency. So I think for this, of course, I will be working closely with all of you, and have come here to work with you, because I know the jibe culture, the jibe, because when I was a student, of course, this used to be one of the sought after. If you're not getting into the Lee School of Economics, if you're not getting into JNU, the third used to be the Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics. So that's the kind of vibe we have to get back, right? That's the kind of, it's not just an institution, a vibrant academic environment where everybody can deliberate, discuss, but meaningfully. And again, I will listen to all of you. I will work with all of you to make it a institute, which again, not just the what we were used to known for, but again, evolving ourselves to suit the current need of the market or the country. So that again, all the policies should start from here, which used to be at one point of time. So this should be the corridor of the Ministry of Finance or Ministry of Economic Affairs, Government of Maharashtra, Government of India. So it should go through the corridors of JIVE. That is what we should aim at. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, sir. And I'm sure we will work together to come up to the expectation of the country. Not only it is going to be one of the best institute in country, but also globally respected while keeping ourselves off, or while making ourselves relevant for the current work context, current requirement, and the students should be futuristic. When we prepare student, it's futuristic. So we know what our history, but we are not more worried about the history. We have to shape our student, we have to shape our culture so that the future will remember it as one of the best institute. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sirs. Thank you very much for your motivating and inspiring guidance to all of us. We all are really excited to grow under your leadership and reach new heights together. Thank you. And for the next event, I hand over the charge of this function to Dr. Atrey Chakravarti, madam. Uh, Atrey, Atrey.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. Yes, now formally we will begin with our event one. That is the launching of the new program, Data Science and Economics for UG students. It's a 4-year duration with 1 year of apprenticeship exposure. Good morning. Honorable Chancellor Shri Sanjeev Sanyal sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Umar Kant sir, Honorable Shri Sitaram Kunte sir, ex-Chief Secretary, Government of Maharashtra, all colleagues and my dear students. It is with immense pride and enthusiasm that I stand before you today to mark the launch of a new chapter in our GIPE's academic journey, which is the new program BSc Economics with Data Science 4-year UG program under the Apprenticeship Embedded Degree Program AEDP. The University Grants Commission has released guidelines for the AEDP aligned with goals of National Education Policy 2020, aiming to better prepare students for future market by combining academic learning with hands-on industry experience, which is very, very essential. The idea for developing AEDP in economics and data science was seeded in early months of 2025 in GIP under the visionary guidance and philosophical direction of our Honorable Chancellor, sir. Under the academic leadership of Board of Studies, a committee of 4 dedicated faculty members were formed. After months of rigorous work, I am pleased to share that the proposal received final approval from the Academic Council on the 4th of July 2025. Here, I must take a moment to express my gratitude to the then Vice Chancellor, Professor Shankar Das, and the newly joined Vice Chancellor, Professor Umakant Das, whose leadership is pioneering and instrumental in this journey. About the program, with an integrated curriculum that blends economics and data science, hands-on training in cutting-edge tools like AI and machine learning, a full year industry apprenticeship in the final year, that is in the 4th year, and with the strong foundation in theory and application-oriented economics, which is the specialty of GIPE, this program will empower students to emerge as analytically skilled, economically grounded, policy aware, and industry ready professionals. So this program marks a significant academic milestone, not only for our institute, but for higher education in India as well. We will be preparing analytically skilled economists who are ready for industry. The admission process will start soon. I request all the aspirants to keep an eye on the website. The eligibility condition is completion of 12th standard with minimum 60% of marks, which is aligned with our existing BSc program. And all the other details will come in the website very soon. Thank you very much. Now I request Professor Ravi Mishra sir, who was the advisor of the Curriculum Development Committee, and he is also the RBI Chair Professor in GIP, to come on the stage and to address the audience. Thank you.
So before I take up the course per se, let me first welcome Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, our Chancellor, Professor Umar Kant, and just now I came to know, I didn't know, sorry about that. Mr. Kunte also present here. So certain things he told about everybody, our Chancellor. So I would like to tell 2-3 things about him because we know each other for last 15 years. So I only have the loco standi to tell that. Correct? If I remember 15 years back when I had an opportunity to welcome him to the institute I was heading, he may not remember. So I had coined a word. He will speak on what you don't know, you don't know. So that is his duty of speech. So that speech in the Japan Staff College that year made all of us have ability to speak things which theoretically are boring. So that is one. And second, as Professor Das told, you cannot say no to his nudging. So I also have fallen a victim to that, but my role are different. And his ideas, he only told 2-3. He would have told me about a dozen. So I can assure you, with Professor Das, we'll introduce all of them, especially this year. Then Professor Das. So I heard from his classmates. So I always go back to the classmates to know about someone, because these academic degrees in different sources are misleading. What I have gathered is he is a very industrious and hard-working person. And to my feeling, given his age and this quality of working hard, so the transformation journey initiated by our Chancellor will bear fruit as fast as possible. So this much I will tell here, not about the course. First, let me thank Mohit, Professor Mohit, Professor Pooja, and Professor Imli for having taken. They have really worked very, very hard, because after the persuasive nudging from the Chancellor, we had to do this, both these courses. And this, in fact, is a very larger issue, as per you, something which I also don't understand. And I also thank Professor Shankar Das, who worked very hard to get it happen. So I was requested to advise here, because I have no academic knowledge how it is done, but Mohit and all, they gave a tremendous presentation in BOS and after Academic Council. And for them, we are seeing it, this course is seeing the light of the day, and we are very proud that the instructions, nudging or dream of the Chancellor is coming to today. So with this, so I will request our Chancellor to speak a few words about the course and formally launch this for the community. Because he always strongly feels community is the word we should serve for, not for student, ourselves, parents and all. The service should be for the community. So this course, he may tell in his own style, that it will be dedicated to the community and being using the students, the future of this country as tools to get that done. Sanyal, please. No, this is the formal launch. This is after that. So I will stand here.
So, thank you, Dr. Mishra. And first, let me say, give a big round of applause both to our Honorable Vice Chancellor and Dr. Mishra for putting in a lot of work into the launch of these two things. So this is the formal launch we are going to do about the data science and economics degree. As we already stated, the idea is really to get a get you to the cutting edge and also do it through this apprenticeship system so that you are already in some ways working with employers before you graduate so that you know what it is that is currently happening. Very often, the sheer experience of trying to work is itself a learning, because it's one thing to learn in a classroom. So the degree will be designed, and by the way, you will have to give us a lot of feedback, because remember, as I said, this is all about decision making and uncertainty. It's also for us a learning, and so we will in some ways co-create it with the students to try and do this. So how do we go about doing the formal launch? Is there? Oh, just announce it. Okay. So I hereby declare the course open. Is that done? Okay, thank you.
Next one will be last.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir. Yes. Now I am here to do the formal beginning of the event 2, that is launching of a new course named Process Reforms for Good Governance and Economic Development for our PG program students. So again, officially, as requested, I will be giving it becomes my duty to give a very brief opening remarks for this, just to, let you know like how it has been evolved and why we have come here today to launch the course. I mean, how we have evolved it. Basically, to brief you about that, I am sure that you are excited to listen to Honorable Chancellor Sir's lecture. So I'll not take much time. Just in 2 minutes, I'll just tell you the crux of it. So again, good morning to all of you. Honorable Chancellor Shri Sanjeev Sanyal Sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Umar Kant Sir, Honorable Shri Sitaram Kunte Sir, all my colleagues and dear students. It's an absolute honor to stand before you, and it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to the launch of the pioneering course, Process Reforms for Good Governance and Development for our PG program students. This course is the inspired initiative of our Honorable Chancellor Sir, whose foresight and commitment to fostering transformative learning in governance and public policy have led to the conceptualization of this unique and much needed academic offering. It is a matter of pride for us that this initiative not only aligns with the evolving demands of the 21st century, but also positions our institute, that is Gokhale Institute, at the forefront of educational innovation. The course received approval from Board of Studies in May 2025, followed by Academic Council's endorsement in July 2025. Here again, I must express our deep gratitude to then Vice Chancellor Professor Shankar Das and our newly joined Vice Chancellor Professor Umar Kant for their pioneering and instrumental roles. I would also like to extend special appreciation to Professor Ravi Mishra, RBI Chair Professor, whose scholarly vision and tireless effort was central to design and development of course content. This course represents more than just academic instructions. The intellectually robust and practically oriented content paves the way towards nurturing a generation of professionals equipped to lead systematic reforms, foster innovation, and contribute meaningfully to governance and development. Let us commit to make this endeavor a success, and we, the faculties, look forward to shape the reformers and thought leaders of tomorrow. Now, I once again invite Professor Ravi Mishra, who played, as I have mentioned, who played the pivotal role to shape the course content to address the audience. Thank you.
Brilliant presentation. So let us clap that her. Brilliant. At least beyond my expectation, because I don't know them, their ability. Brilliant. So now, um, again, inspiration is he himself. Professor Sankardas and me were nudged into getting it done without fail. Here there was no nudging. This was an instruction. And he may have forgotten. He told, out of PMO's office, we will be the first to introduce this in this country and maybe in the world. So that is how we started. Now let me thank three youngsters. They were available at that time without any work. So because I wanted some help, what is this? Because speaking, we have had him on 2-3 hours on that, but getting a 30 session was a difficult job. So let me thank you all. Please clap for these youngsters. They didn't know anything. One is Ambaris, Professor Ambaris, Santosh, and Arjun for trying hard in 3 days' time and give me a draft, basic draft, on which I made a course which Professor Sankardas told too loaded and heavy, but we could not. And then I sent to him. He told excellent, so I got happy. But the, how do you find teachers? That is the issue. This is a new thing. It was so difficult to design a course. So here I will fail in the duty if I don't thank three senior professors whom I approached. This is the first year. One or the other cannot do it. It requires a lot of hard work, lot of visiting faculty, as the chancellor told. So some senior people are required. So let me thank Professor Ranjit Patnaik for having fallen prey to my nudging. He nudged me, I nudged him. The first module, first session will be taken by himself. Then you have to take on. And the second module by Professor Hari. He is there? Yes, Hari. And we had designed a little empirical thing also. The knowledge of statistics and econometrics. Towards doing this also required an expert who can teach the use of these techniques. And with lot of persuasion, Professor Dayakar has kindly agreed. So clap for him. And naturally, as advised him, I will take the bunch. So the last module, which will be only getting very senior people to come here and share their experiences. Like as he was telling that metro rail, that gentleman from Kerala, this kind of people, those who are famous in finding simple solution to complex issues. I quote Sanjeev Sanyal. He tells that. He may not be thinking it's a quote already. Finding simple solution to complex tasks. So that is really the objective of the course. And initially, because of my lack of experience, so with Professor Patnaik, we thought we will keep it open for public policy MSc. But then it was in a joint, it was decided and let us open to all master students. So as an elective this year, whose session will start right after I leave. So all those who are keen, by now you know its utility in terms of even unemployability, because you join an organization and you say you have the ability to solve problems there into simpler tasks and your employability will be higher. So with this, I also call upon all MS students, all 7 or 8, to start thinking tonight and by tomorrow evening give your names to join the course because of, again, logistic reasons. And with this, now, so I request the Chancellor to launch and take the first session of this course, please.
Thank you, Professor Mishra. Thank you, Honorable Vice Chancellor. So this course is of course open to all master students. But if you are from either the PhD or from the bachelor's course, do stay back. I think I will hopefully find this course, the first lecture of this course, an interesting insight into how governments actually make decisions. So, so please feel free to attend this first lecture. Now, what is this course about? Is it clear? Can you all see, or do you want the lights to be further dimmed? You can see it? Okay. So this course is about the road to Viksit Bharat is paved by process reforms. So I'm going to talk about a favorite topic of mine, which is an area of reform, and I'm going to talk about largely live reforms that are actually happening now or have just been completed. And all the examples I will give are the ones that I have been personally involved in. So it's not something theoretically I'm talking about. This is how these things evolved. And you'll get a sense of how problems are identified, how they are solved, how feedback loops happen, how I don't always succeed in even implementing it. So, but you will understand how this works. It is important also because this sort of course is actually not there even in Masters of Public Policy in top universities around the world. Most of their studies are done, as you will very quickly see, in a very different way, whereas I am actually showing you live examples of how these things are done. And there's actually relatively little academic literature on this subject as well. In some ways, we will have to be, and this is to the faculty, you will be literally creating the first generation of case studies and so on in this. And don't think that the way I'm teaching it necessarily is where it will go. Over many iterations, it will evolve into a real subject. So, the question that first arises, reforms are reforms that change the structure of however that activity happens. So, for example, the introduction of GST, that's a structural reform. It changed the way indirect taxation happened. The introduction of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, that changed the way creative destruction happens in the economy. The Monetary Policy Committee introduction of inflation targeting, that changes the way monetary policy is done. Or even if you go back to 1991, the liberalization, which changed the way our economy functioned from being a socialist type system to a market-based system. These are all structural reforms. There are big picture reforms that change the very structure of that, of the economy of that activity. However, most of reforms are actually not structural changes. Most of reforms are actually nuts and bolts changes. This is where the administration really, the rubber mostly hits the ground. And these process reforms are very often may sound trivial. Rule number 43C, subsection D, 3 words have to be changed. I know Kunte Saab has probably done a lifetime of this. And so, but this is what most of any organization, not just government, you work for a company, you work for academia, I'm sure Umar Kant ji will be doing these kinds of changes. But this is the problem solving that most of you, most of the time will be doing. But oddly enough, this kind of nuts and bolts reforms don't make it to the front page of the newspapers, even though this is where much of the efficiency gains, total factor productivity of a system actually improves. So this is mostly, when I say it, therefore, is a process reform is not about changing the structure, but making that given structure more efficient. Now, you would think that there would be a large amount of academic literature on this, and this is being widely taught. Oddly enough, this is not widely taught. In fact, there are relatively little academic interest in this. There are, of course, individual case studies, but as a field of study, academia has largely ignored it. Now, this is particularly strange because in the business field, there is a huge amount of literature on business process reengineering. If you did an MBA, you almost certainly have to suffer through a course on business process reengineering. And yet, there is almost nothing on government process reengineering. And this is what I'm going to really talk about. So, a lot of what I have done is to take material from business process reengineering and change it. And there are certain fundamental differences in how you have to do it in government. But you will see at the back that there are obvious parallels between the two. So I'm going to start here with a little bit of the theory of how it is done, and then I will illustrate all of it with live examples. So just bear with me through this part. So the first is, what are the steps of doing a reform in government? So obviously the first step is to identify an activity where there's an inefficiency. Now, having identified something, the first step that you should always do is to document the as-is process. This is very, very important. You will be surprised the extent to which people who are doing reforms do not do this step. But when you document a process, you will certainly discover where all the problems are. And now that I have done literally dozens, if not hundreds of these reforms, let me say that you will discover something called an 80-20 rule. 80% of the problem is caused by 20% of the process. And so you don't actually need to do a structural reform. Doing 20% gets 80% of the way, and usually that last 20% just gets ghissoed out by the momentum of change. So doing this as-is process, and I'll give you one live example right here. I'm currently working to try and reform something called the IEPFA. This is the Investor Education and Protection Fund. Okay, this is where shares go to die.
Yes.
Okay, supposing you lose your equity shares of some company or you inherited some, you don't directly get it back. It goes to this fund, but as anybody who's attempted to get their money back from this will know, it is extremely difficult to get your money back. And there's now 1 lakh crores worth of shares stuck in this fund, and it's very difficult to get it back. So I have been raising this issue in recent months. If you're reading my newspapers, you will see this. And of course, the first instinct is let's digitize it. But you see, if you digitize an inefficient process, all you're doing is encoding it in, it doesn't improve things. So when I documented this process, what did I discover? I found that 25 steps are needed to get your money back. And in the 24th step, if something goes wrong, you have to go back to step 1. So naturally, it's extremely inefficient. So of this 1 lakh crore fund, in any year, only 2,000 crores of money goes back. And that is less than the amount of new stuff that comes in. So, the problem keeps growing. So this is why this step is very important. But once you have done the step and you have identified where the problem is, obviously the next step is to do the changes that you want to do. And then comes the very last step, very important, is monitoring the new process. This is unfortunately in government very often not done. You monitor the change to see if those changes actually had the impact. And even if you solved your problem, did you have any unintended consequences? Now remember, these unintended consequences may actually be positive also. It's not always bad. But when you're dealing with large systems, the unintended consequences can sometimes be larger than whatever it is that you are trying to actually change. So all of these are important, and I will illustrate these. Then comes the issue of what are the types of process reforms you can do. So I have identified 7 types. I'm thinking of adding another 8th one. If you think of another one, I'll add it to the list. There's nothing sacrosanct about it. I invented this. You can add to it. The first is to revisit default lists and precedents. All large systems, this will also be true of JIPE, will basically, a lot of the day-to-day activities are run not because it's written and encoded in any law, but it's just the way it is done. There's no reason why it is like that. And of course, governments suffer from this because they always default lists, default precedents that keep that system running and this, and nobody goes and relooks at it. So the first and simplest kind of reform is simply to go and relook at why are things done the way they are. And very often you'll discover that they are like that for no reason but that's how it is. Type 2. There will be formal existing administrative processes which function. Relook at that and look at whether it needs process reform. Third is somewhere we actually have to go and make changes in the regulation. So far, the first two types, you don't actually change regulation or laws. You can just change it administratively, but here you have to go and actually change regulations. Then you actually have to change the legislation. Here you have to go back to parliament or the state legislature. If you're doing it in a company, you'll have to go back to the board and you have to change the law. Then type 5, you have to add some capacity at some level of government. Sometimes you see we are also so focused, and think bureaucratic bottleneck, and we think that the way to get rid of it is to narrow the bureaucracy even further. But in fact, sometimes the bureaucratic bottleneck is because there are not enough people there. So expanding it, and that's why it's important to do that as is mapping, because you find where the blockage is. Sometimes it is by removing a state mandated activity. So the blockage may not be actually in the state, but some rule that allows some other agency to create a bottleneck. And finally, merging, closing, and restructuring outdated government agencies. Every government in the world, including ours, at the state level, at the central level, at even the municipal level, there are large numbers of outdated government agencies. They are created perhaps for good reasons, but then after they have become outdated, nobody bothers to shut them down, and they hang around in the system, at the very least wasting resources and sometimes getting in the way. All of these I will give you live examples. Now, the first type that I talked about is revising default lists. So every government has certain lists that exist. Now, one of these kinds of lists that exist is a list of monuments of national importance. Okay, every country has it. We also have one. Now, about a couple of years ago, the Honorable Prime Minister asked me to have a look at it. Now, remember, I'm an economist, not something I normally do. But he said, please have a look to see if this list of national monuments we have makes any sense. So I looked at it, and this is what I discovered. First of all, the country has 3,695 national monuments under the protection of the Archaeological Survey of India. Okay. Now, where did we get these? It turns out that 2/3 of them we inherited en masse from the colonial era list. So British had a list, we just took it. And most of the rest is actually lists we got from the princely states. So other than a very small handful of national monuments we have added since independence, most of what are today national monuments are actually what was inherited from the colonial period, either from the colonial government or from the princely states. Okay, fair enough. Then I began to dig into this list. So what is there in the list? First of all, I discovered that there are several dozen national monuments that the Archaeological Survey of India does not even know where they are. They are missing. It didn't go missing today. There are parliamentary questions from the 1970s where the Archaeological Survey has given in writing that this national monument is lost. Okay, so that is the first problem. But that is not even the biggest problem. The bigger problem is that there are hundreds of national monuments that shouldn't be national monuments at all, including several colonial era graves of obscure officials. So, for example, Nagaland, a small state, it has only four odd national monuments. 3 of those are actually graves of obscure colonial era officials. One of them is the PWD engineer, not even a senior person, who was killed by a local tribesman. We don't know who that tribesman is. Maybe that tribesman's grave should have been national monument. He's a freedom fighter at least. But this British PWD engineer, whose grave is not even a great monument. I mean, I understand if it was something architecturally brilliant, Victoria Memorial or something like that, I understand why you want to preserve it. But it's actually a normal grave, smaller than the stage, and it's a national monument. Now, you may think, why should we care? We should care because all the rules and regulations that apply to the Taj Mahal also apply to this. This has a budget. There is a person designated to look after it. So it's not harmless. And as I will show you shortly, some of these end up in very crowded areas. And imagine what happens. You see, in a national monument, there is a rule 100 plus 200 yards around the national monument is protected. So if you happen to live there, you have to actually comply with all the ASI rules. So you can imagine what happens if you randomly have a national monument in your area. You may want to make some small change inside your house. You have to go to Archaeological Survey of India. There is an unending amount of harassment related to it, and not the least rent seeking as well. And for an example, live example of that, let me tell you about the statue of John Nicholson. John Nicholson was a British brigadier general who, after the revolt of 1857 and 1858, he sacked Delhi, what is now Old Delhi, and he's the guy who did it. And he, even by the standards of that time, he was considered to be fairly extreme. He massacred tens of thousands of Indians after the sacking of Delhi. He, in fact, was much worse than General Dyer in the number of deaths he caused. And of course, the colonial government of the East India Company at that time thought he was a hero. So they raised a statue to him in front of Kashmiri Gate in Old Delhi. So that statue became a national monument. In fact, his grave also became a national monument. So when we became independent in 1947, the government inherited his statue as a national monument. So it became a national monument of the Republic of India, complete with all those rules I told you about. So somewhere 11 years after we became independent, the government of Northern Ireland wrote to the government of India saying that now, I'm sure you have no use for John Nicholson. Can we have his statue? So the government of the day packed his statue and sent it to Northern Ireland, where it stands in his hometown, and I'm assuming they celebrate his birthday or whatever they do there. But that is not the interesting part. The interesting part is that it was not delisted from our list of national monuments. So therefore, the empty spot on where that statue used to stand continued to be a national monument since till last year. And it's in Kashmiri Gate, which is the most crowded place in Delhi, 300-meter. So you can imagine how many people, thousands of people and homes are there. All the rules and regulations that apply to the Taj Mahal were applying to all these people. And they had to go to the Archaeological Survey, local circle officer, get permissions, and all kinds of harassment, rent seeking, etc. used to happen. Till, of course, I discovered it. And you'll be pleased to know that in December 2024, it was finally denotified. This is his grave. It is still a national monument. You can see that blue board there, which threatens you with dire consequences if you desecrate his grave. I am working on getting it delisted, but meanwhile, on just 3 weeks ago, on 3rd of July, 4 weeks now, exactly a month ago, we got another 17 such monuments delisted and 4 new monuments listed. So it's not just we are getting rid of them, we are listing them. I'm giving you this example because literally there are all kinds of such things. The list of guests that are invited to state events, whether central government, state government, ministries, they never get revised. A few names at the edge will be added. But very often, when I was in finance ministry, I looked through the list of people who were invited by the finance minister every year before the budget to have interactions. And I discovered that significant numbers of the people in that list were no longer alive. Of course, those people couldn't turn up for the meeting, presumably. But they were there in the list. Nobody bothered to edit them out. And this happens all the time. So this is the first kind of reforms that you do. It's simple, common sense, but somebody has to put in the effort to do it. Next. This is about administrative streamlining. Okay. Here, the rules and regulations don't have to change, but the process administrative has to be changed. And I'm going to give you the example of voluntary liquidation of companies. Now, in any country, new companies are made every year. But every year, large number of companies are also liquidated, removed. They shut down, exit. This is natural. And in fact, 90% of them are done voluntarily every year. It is important to remember this, that only a very handful of companies actually go bankrupt or shut down or liquidated because they are insolvent. 90% every year that are shut down happens because some person was running a company, is now become old, his children don't want to do that business, shut down. Some special purpose vehicle was created for some activity, that activity has finished, shut down the company. So nobody is objecting to the shutting down of these companies. Okay? And yet, till recently, it used to take years to shut down a company in this country. And remember, when you keep a company alive, it's not cheap. You still have to do its accounts. You're still supposed to do its quarterly meetings, annual general body meeting. All it's a painful thing to keep a company running. You want to shut it down, but you can't. So I looked into this. I was then in the finance ministry as principal economic advisor. And this is what I discovered. You see, there are two ways of shutting down companies in India. One is Section 248 of Companies Act 2013. And the other is Section 59 of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. This latter is used only for very large companies, so we'll just ignore it for the purposes of this presentation. But the data is here in the presentation for those interested. So let's take Section 248. What is the process of shutting down a company? Effectively, you have to go and get NOCs, no objection certificates, from a bunch of people, tax, labor, etc., to shut your company down. First of all, for no reason, it's not then regulation, you had to get them on a certain sequence. Now, obviously, that meant you had to do it in sequence. You couldn't do it parallelly. You had to do it in sequence, and the person below in the sequence will not take up your case unless you've gotten the previous NOC. Now, imagine the waste of time. There's no reason why, say, the income tax can't deal with your NOC without looking at the labor piece of paper. Why? But that was how it was. Then I discovered that after you've got all the NOCs, you have to go to the registrar of companies. And the registrar of companies has to put up an advertisement saying that you are shutting down this company. Fair enough. You want to tell the world, if anybody has an objection, they can come and object. But what used to happen is that the registrar of companies may not put up that advertisement of yours for years, unless you, of course, pay the rent. I discovered this, and in fact made a presentation to the then Honorable Finance Minister at that time. This is about 3 years ago, when I was in Finance Ministry, to Honorable Finance Minister Nirmala ji. So then we took up this issue. And so we began to smoothen it. So what did we do? First of all, we created a website called CPACE. Some of you can go on there and look at it yourself. Now, if you want to shut down a company, you put all your detail into this website. And this is very important. Simply digitizing the old process would not have worked. Here, we have changed the process. The system itself sends emails to relevant departments to ask for NOC. If nobody gives any written objection, then after that period, a list is created, automatically generated, and that goes to the registrar of companies. Unless the registrar of companies gives in writing an objection to a particular company, it is deemed to have been accepted, and now a list is generated for putting up the advertisement. And look at what has happened as a result. Average approval time used to take almost 500 days. Now it takes only 60 days. 88% reduction in time taken. This is now the fastest in the world. It's even faster than Singapore. And it didn't require some great Nobel laureate work. Common sense, make sure the system works, and very importantly, document whether it actually changed. I'm personally keeping track of this, because moment people take their eye off, there is a default towards higher numbers. So we have to keep track of this. Now, this is of course the data I have on section 59 of IBC, and here also we have made big changes. I'm not going to talk about it. Those interested can look up the presentation. Now, by the way, this particular change has been put into a formal paper, which is there on the Economic Advisory Council to Prime Minister website as a case study. I showed it to the Prime Minister about 3 months ago. That is when he suggested that case studies of these reforms should be made, and I have requested members of the faculty, Vice Chancellor Saab, and others as well, RBI, state government, to make case studies and to teach them. You will be surprised how few case studies of government process reforms exist in the world. So we can in fact create, just like Harvard business case studies exist for business, we can probably for government create an entire ecosystem of such case studies and teach them. The same presentation, by the way, that you are seeing was made just 1 week ago to the incoming group of joint secretary level officers at Labasna in Mussoorie. So do remember that you are literally listening to the cutting edge, because this is what live administrators, this is also there, this is also being taught to them. And this presentation on the case study about voluntary liquidation already exists as a case study formally published by us. So, you can easily use it to teach. Now I'm coming to changes in regulations. So here you actually need to change regulations. And I'm going to give you the example of something called the Revised Terms and Conditions Other Service Provider 2008 of the Telecom Ministry that used to exist till about 5 years ago. Now, you may be surprised to know that as per this Revised Terms and Conditions Other Service Providers 2008 regulation, if till we changed it in 2000, you guys were working from home on your laptops using the telecom system, you were actually doing something illegal. Did you know this? You will be shocked to know this, because what this regulation said, that anybody doing any commercial activity or any work from home using telecom system had to specifically go and take permission from the telecom ministry under this regulation, because you were then all deemed as other service providers. This definition of other service providers essentially was so vague that pretty much everybody was another service provider. Not only that, not only did you have to get specific permission, you had to have an EPA BX machine in every location. So technically, if you were working on your bed and then went to your dining room, you needed a separate EPA BX machine for it. And most of you probably don't even know what an EPA BX machine is. It's a 1980s technology as an electronic exchange. Today, in the world of cloud, this makes no sense. And yet it was there in the regulations till 5 years ago. We also had strange other regulations. For example, we had restrictions between infrastructure sharing between domestic and international. Now, all of these regulations, cleverly, the telecom officials didn't apply to the regular man on the street. But they applied it to the BPO sector, IT-enabled services, and many of them had great difficulty, massive compliant costs, and of course, again, hundreds, if not thousands of crores of rent seeking that happened as a result of these regulations. And to show you how onerous they are, look at this one. Restrictions on infrastructure sharing between domestic and international OSPs. So supposing you are a BPO call center for, say, Singapore Airlines, random example, and you have sold a ticket to an Indian national in Singapore who flies to Delhi or Pune and has a problem with the ticket. Now, is he an international or a domestic? Who knows? How do you define this? Who cares? Surely the whole purpose of free-flowing service from a call center is that you shouldn't care. And yet, till 2020, you actually had to separate your domestic and international call center. All of this is crazy. And yet they existed. Now, how did I discover this problem? When the in March of 2020, when the lockdown was done because of COVID, the telecom ministry issued a directive stating that work from home was allowed till December 2020 and that the revised terms and condition OSP regulations were held in abeyance. Now, to the uninitiated, it would have looked like a good thing. Arey, you're allowing us to work from home. But since I am a suspicious sort of chap, I understood what the real thing that the telecom officials were doing was to signal that, okay, we are allowing the BPO fellows to work from home because of now there's a lockdown. But don't forget that these rules still apply and you'll have to come back to us. That was the real message. So, having understood this issue, I then took it up, and we first issued a easing of these norms in November 2020. And further, because the first round didn't adequately do it, in June 2021, we again did it. And essentially, we now have a clear definition of OSP. It's defined in such a way that it doesn't really apply to most people or almost to anybody. We now don't have to care about EPX, BX machines. You can do what is obvious, use the cloud. You guys were anyway doing it. Remove distinctions between domestic and international, and so on and so forth. So basically, these rules now don't really apply for most purposes. And look at the benefit you get from it. In December 2021, NASSCOM did a study to see what happened as a result of this. I keep telling you, feedback important. They found that 92% of IT-enabled services and BPO sector companies, 92% of them had seen a significant reduction in their compliance burden. 28% of them said that compliance burden had dropped by 50% or more. And so, in one shot, we became a burden that was in the system, a hurdle, was simply removed. And if you have seen that there's been a boom in the GCC, Global Capability Centers, in the last 5 years, one of the reasons is the removal of these compliance requirements. And you can see how you can make a system dramatically more efficient through process reforms. Now I'm going to get to type 4. And I'm going to give you an example of something. I don't want you to get the impression that every time I take up an issue, I win. I don't. And here is an issue I'm still working on. Now, how many of you even know what legal metrology is? Anybody in this room knows what legal metrology even is? Well, legal metrology relates to the rules and regulations of weights, measures, and labels. Every country in the world has it. And after traffic rules, this is the second largest source of rent seeking in this country. And yet not many people know about this. What basically the ways the rules are set in India is very peculiar. You see, I have no problems with rules and regulations on weights, labels, and measures. All countries have it, they need it. Otherwise, there'll be, rampant cheating and so on. So I have no objection to having rules on this. But the way the rules are set in India is very peculiar, that on the first instance, you're given a very small fine if you have the first offense. But on a second offense, you can actually be sent to jail for as much as 7 years. Now, look at the table below to see what happens as a result. As you can see, I have data till 21-22. You can see, of course, it goes down a little bit because those are COVID years, but basically a little over 1 lakh of cases happened in the first offense. When I looked into this, I discovered that basically the legal metrology inspectors basically find some small fault, the font of the label is wrong or something like that. And they then impose a very small fine, 2,000 rupees or something. Now you suppose you accept it and you pay the 2,000 rupees. Now notice what happens. You are their slave. Because on the second instance, they can send you off to jail for 7 years. So look at what happens on the second offense. There are hardly any cases, 12, 5, 3, and so on. And it used to be that the Consumer Affairs Ministry used to present this data and see how wonderful our laws are, that people, nobody dares after doing the first offense to do a second offense. But of course, you and I know what actually happened. So when I pointed this out in a newspaper article in the year 2022, they stopped publishing subsequent data. That is why it stops in 22. Then, through fair amount of pushing, and you, as Professor Mishra said, I am a very persistent in my pushing. I managed to get some of these legal metrology rules removed in the Jan Vishwas bill and decriminalized. But when the rule came out, I discovered that section 30, 33, and 36 were retained as criminalized. And of course, the reason for it is very simple. They account for about 80% of the cases. Now, I understand that not everything can be decriminalized. And this is where I had also to learn this. Because there is a case for criminalizing. Otherwise, there are places where people will actually cheat and bypass the system and so on. But you don't want to have a trigger that you appear too quickly. Otherwise, the problem I mentioned will happen of rent seeking. So now with Jan Vishwas 2, we are now trying to change that such that at least there are several layers and things are done commensurate to the crime. So for minor offenses, even in a second case, you can have a small fine and continue and so on and so forth. So that essentially the criminal part, the criminal proceedings part is done in relatively rare cases. We will probably do this, but basically there has to be some checks and balances in the system. And let's see, maybe in the new Jan Vishwas, we will try to solve it, if not in a subsequent one. So this is a live issue. And hopefully when as things pan out, you will have a sense that this is the kind of thinking that went into it. Now I'm going to get into an area where you need to add state capacity. You may have realized by now that I'm generally quite critical of bureaucracy. But the fact is that you do need bureaucracy, and there are areas where you actually need to add to bureaucracy. And I'm going to give you an example here relating to intellectual property rights. Now, we want to be Vishwaguru, knowledge economy, and so on. Clearly, if you want to succeed in this space, you need to have patents. But look at how our patent system used to be 10 years ago. In 2015, effectively, what was the situation? China in that year had 11 lakh filings and about 3.5 lakh grants of patents. US was doing a little less than 6 lakh patent filings and doing a little less than 3 lakh patents granted. We were doing only 47,000 odd filings. First of all, that itself is a tiny number, but we were giving only 6,000 patents. Not even in the same order of magnitude. So we began to look into this, and you will notice that in last few years, and I'm going to use the 2023 number, I'll come to the 24 number later and I'll explain what's going on. But in 2023, we began, this is really in the 22 and 23, we worked hard and we began to clear the backlog. As a result of that, in that year, you can see the number of grants went up to 1 lakh. So in 8 years' time, we went from 6,000 to 1 lakh, the number of grants. And in that year, as you can see, the number of grants is actually higher than the number of filings. So we basically cleared the backlog. A lot of hard work went into it, and I have to say the patent office officials worked like unbelievable effort into doing this, but they did it. But look at the problem we now have. The problem we now have is that we are not getting enough filings. Because remember, not more than 35 to 40% of filings will actually get a grant. So we now get filings of, in this year, we have got filings of 1 lakh. We have given, in 2024, sorry, we got filings of 1 lakh and we gave out about 33,000 grants. Our capacity had already gone up significantly, but we can't do more than that. But we have a peculiar situation here now that for once the government is actually ahead of the curve. We have more capacity for dealing with filings, but the research and development, the science community is not giving us enough filings. But we will keep adding to the capacity here because we hope that filings of patents will go up dramatically. The response from the R&D community will happen and we'll do well. But do remember Meanwhile, look at how the filings and grants in US, China, etc. have dramatically gone up. So this is not a game where we can stand still. And what was the reason why China and US do so much better? Well, one was, of course, there were problems with the processes and the systems of opposing grants. But one simple problem was that we simply didn't have enough people in the patent office. The US has over 8,000 people in patent office. China has almost 14,000 people in patent office. But in 2015-16, we only had 271 people to compete. So it's like going into a cricket match where the other chap has 13 or 14 players and you do not even have one player. Of course, you're going to lose. So look at how the numbers have now steadily been increased. In 24-25, the number went up to 1,383. So one big jump up. But we are continuing to add people. So by the end of next year, we'll have about 2,000 people here, and then maybe if necessary add to it. This will give us the capacity to be able to handle about 2 to 2.5 lakh filings a year, which is equivalent to about 1 lakh patent grants a year. Still far below the about 3 lakh patents the US grants. And in the case of China, they grant about 9 lakh patents, but you have to take it with a pinch of salt because they have something called utility patents, which are lower quality. But even they grant about 3 lakh good quality patents a year. But still, it's in the same ballpark, 1 lakh versus 3 lakh. So at least we are playing in the same league, and it will take us past, make us the third largest patent grantor in the world. So we will have, but the key point I'm making is, for once, the government is ahead of the curve. We are creating the capacities. And now, ironically, we are waiting for both government, but more importantly, private sector patent applications to go up. So any of you here in the audience want a patent, or you have friends who want to do a patent in India, well, let me tell you, the patent office is waiting for you. Now, type 6. This is where you have to remove a state mandated activity. So the problem is not inside the government, but in an activity that has been granted, sometimes a monopoly or some side of power, to some other entity outside government, but now they have become a bottleneck. Okay, there are many such entities. One entity that I'm going to talk about is the mediation process. Now, in case you're wondering what mediation is, this is what it is. It is a pre-litigation process which allows two parties to mediate with each other so that they don't have to go and file a case. Now, so it's mediation, I have no problem with. It's a good thing. We already have a very heavy, crowded legal system. Obviously, I don't want people to go there. So mediation is perfectly reasonable. I'm in favor of it. But look at what the law actually did. It created something called Section 12A of the Commercial Courts Act, which made it mandatory for all commercial disputes to go to a mediation process. Okay, now you say it's a good thing, we should force everybody to do this. Now look at what actually happens. What happens is you are forcing everybody to go to mediator. Now the mediators have absolutely no incentive to provide good services. They know you have to come to them. And so this is a artificially created bottleneck and monopoly, which now the lawyers love. And look at the results. So I found the data for up to 2024 for two commercial courts in Mumbai. Mumbai is our financial capital. So commercial courts there are the most important in the country. And I looked at the data, what happens to mediation. And it shows that about 98% of mediation fails. So for almost all the cases, this mediation process fails. And yet you're adding 6 months of time. You're paying a mediator, you're paying your lawyers. And in the end of it, almost certainly you're going to end up in the same court system. Now, of course, you need to improve the court system. That is a big debate in its own right. But why add 6 months to this? Now, I've been arguing this for the last 1 year. I haven't won the battle. But of course, what I don't do is after dark, I don't go anywhere near the law courts and mediation centers. So I'm not the most popular person with lawyers. I'm now going to talk about the last category called merging, closing, and restructuring outdated government agencies. Now, every large system, it'll be true of universities also, it'll be true of state government, it'll be true of central government, it'll be true of the governments around the country, and you have recently gone through the Doge experience again. The US also looked into this, was to look at whether or not the government is where it's supposed to be, and whether or not there are large numbers of bodies that are outdated. Now, very many outdated bodies happen because maybe there was some use in the 1960s, maybe there was some reason that this body was created. The body has now defunct, it is not needed anymore, but now there is an interest group around that body. They have land, they have budgets, they have people. So it is very difficult very often to shut these bodies down. So they exist and you keep accumulating them. New bodies are created. Sometimes, of course, they were never of any use at all, even in the beginning, because they were created as post-retirement gigs for bureaucrats, judges, politicians, and so on. So even in the beginning, they had no use. Many of those politicians and judges and bureaucrats have passed away, but those organizations have continued. And there are literally hundreds of these in the central government that I have found. And we have begun to close them down. Here are some examples of some that over the last 5 years that have been closed down. Tariff Commission, All India Handloom Board, All India Handicraft Board, Central Organization of Modernization of Workshops, this is in railways, Rashtriya Mahila Kosh, then there was Children's Film Society, Directorate of Film Festivals, National Film Archives. Now some of these have been merged into the National Films Development Corporation. Now it is very important, and whenever you try to shut one of these things down, those who are incumbents will try and say, look, our activity is very, very important. And that when you try and shut it down, they will state, look, this activity is important, but that is not what is the correct way of thinking about it. The thinking is not whether the activity is important, but whether or not this body is doing something useful to promote that activity. So, for example, take All India Handicraft Board. So when the All India Handicraft Board was shut down about 2022, there was a lady who I will not name, who had been for 20 years its chairman. 20 years. So when it got shut down, she wrote an article and published it on social media, stating that this government is a fascist, they don't care for artisans, therefore they have shut it down, and so on. Now let me tell you, yes, All India Handicraft Board is there for helping the artisans, but there are many other bodies also. There is the Khadi Udyog, there are Silk Board, there is cottage industries, Emporium, state governments also have bodies. So question is not whether helping artisans is a good thing. The question is, what does the All India Handicraft Board do? So when this happened, when this note came out from this chairman, the then textile minister, Smriti Irani, under whom this body used to come, she posted a reply to this post and stated, Madam, if you can show us the minutes of a meeting of this board of the last 7 years, at any meeting minutes of the last 7 years, we will re-establish the body. We are still waiting for it. So similarly, there were many other bodies as well. Tariff Commission. Now you may think that it has something to do with setting up tariffs, but let me tell you its actual interesting history. You see, before 1991, we were a socialist economy, you all know that. Now in a socialist economy, many commodities like cement, various grades of steel, aluminium, etc., their prices used to be actually set not by the market, but by a body called the Bureau of Costs and Pricing, BICP. It was a very powerful body based in Delhi and had a very senior official heading it. It had a very senior person heading it, this BICP. And it was very, very powerful. You know, 1 rupee increase or decrease in the price of some commodity would make or break that industry. So BICP was very, very powerful going off. Obviously, some people from BICP are here. Yeah, I see. I think there is some deep subterfuge by BICP. Keeps going off. Now, so in 1991, we saw the reforms happened, and suddenly all these commodities began to have market prices. So BICP stopped existing. Okay. Tell me if you can't hear, huh? So BICP stopped. So the job that BICP was supposed to do, which was to set these prices, suddenly no longer needed to be done, because now your liberalized economy, you can now do it in market-based pricing for cement, steel, etc. So what happened as a result is that BICP's job stopped happening. But interestingly, nobody remembered to shut down BICP. So it continued to exist for several years. And remember, at its height, it used to have about 300-400 people working there, with a Secretary to Government of India rank official as DG. So it's a very senior position. But by 4 or 5 years later, the BICP realized that it didn't have a future. So now the sensible thing to do would be to shut it down. Now it had, you know, big offices just behind Khan Market. You'll see this very ugly grey color building. It used to occupy several floors there. You would think it would shut down, but oh no. All it did was rename itself as the Tariff Commission. But it, in fact, had nothing to do with tariffs. Because you see, the tariffs are not set by the Tariff Commission in India, because tariffs in India set between the Finance Ministry and Commerce, and maybe the sectoral ministry, pharmaceuticals or whatever. DPIIT, where Tariff Commission sits, has no role to play in setting the customs tariffs of this country. Yet it sat there, and it sat there for 30 odd years till I discovered them in the year 2021. So when I sent a note up to the Honorable Prime Minister saying that, sir, this should be shut down, he said, okay, look into it. So the note went around. So the person who was heading this institution got very annoyed with me. Now, I don't know why, because you see, this is government. Nobody is going to lose their jobs. They'll just get reallocated to some other department. So she complained to the cabinet secretary. So this is the height of COVID. We had a meeting, and she complained that, you know, Tariff Commission is doing good work in understanding the import-export dynamics of this country. So thankfully, the then cabinet secretary called a meeting in which he was there. Also, the chairman of CBIDC was there, chairman of the Indirect Tax and Customs was there, and Secretary Commerce was there, a colleague in the same ministry from that. And cabinet secretary then asked the chairman and Secretary Commerce, have you ever used a Tariff Commission report to set any tariffs? And they said that they were completely unaware of the existence of the Tariff Commission. So following this, the Tariff Commission was shut down in the year 2022 or 23. It no longer exists. As I said, I don't know why anybody objected to this, because nobody lost their job. They were just reallocated. These are all government officials after all. But as a result of which, the Tariff Commission now no longer exists. Now, what is the point I'm making in all of this? The main point I'm making is all living systems, including governments, companies, any large system, even Gokhale Institute, needs to be continuously renewed. This is not something that happens naturally. There will be people who will get in the way, because naturally certain interests arise. These are human things. Do not blame anybody. These are human frailties in a sense. And yes, sometimes that body may be doing 80% no good, but 10%, 20% something good. that don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You have to work with that system carefully to try and do this. So, in order to improve the any system, and I gave you an example, live examples that you have seen. There are 100 such. I will be documenting some of them and hopefully you'll be taught them. But let me say, as a part of your coursework, you will be made to study some of the processes at JIPE as well. So live cases of processes, process of how admissions is done, how maybe your maintenance is done, whatever you take up, or it may be an issue relating to, how, for example, maybe the process of how our social media presence is. I don't know. Think about it. As I said, the first step is identifying a problem. So identify one. Study the process as it is. Come up with something good. And let me tell you, the management, if it thinks that the idea is a good one, we will try to implement it. And then it'll be your job to follow it through and see whether it worked. Because maybe your idea was a good one in theory, but leads to bad unintended consequences, then you will have to have the idea, the system will have to be able to rework the system through the feedback loop and come up with a better system. So you have a lot of this, as you have noticed, is about groping and decision making in the dark, under uncertainty, dealing with real human beings who have their own interests. You have to take them along. And for all the mocking I happen to subject my poor colleagues from the bureaucracy, let me say that none of these reforms would have been possible without them. Okay? Many of these ideas actually came from them. I may have identified the problem, but in the end, how did I map it? It came from them. They came the solution. They implemented many of these things, and they gave me the data that it succeeded or didn't succeed. So much of this has to be done in a way, in a collegial way, in which these things get done. And as you can see, if we are currently the world's fastest growing economy, it's not necessarily just because of some big reform we did in the beginning. It's an ongoing thing. Continuously, somebody is sitting in there and tweaking something in the system, whether it's monetary policy or and other things. So let me conclude in this lecture by saying that there are many things that we need to do at JIPE, but by introducing this particular course, the idea is to try and get you into the problem solving mode. And as you may have seen, I tried to give you a sense of the kind of thinking process that went into it so that you can see that even I had to wade into the muck, dig out the data, try to make the changes. You saw that I don't always succeed in getting the changes done. When the change happens, did it manage to? All of these are things that you have to begin to think about, because this is something that AI is not going to replace. Human beings will be doing this generations into the future. So with that, let me end this particular session. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. So this was the formal lecture. I don't think we have time for Q&A, or do we? I don't know. But I just have been reminded, in the spirit of cutting and making changes along the way, that in my original announcements of changes at Gokhale, I also forgot to announce something. So in the spirit of sort of giving a local flavor to Gokhale Institute, in addition to, of course, the idea of introducing local cultural things, we are also going to do one more thing. We're going to introduce memorial lectures dedicated to some of the greats relating to the past history of this part of the country. So the first in this series is being also announced. It's going to be named after Mahatma Shinde. It'll be a memorial lecture on contemporary geopolitics. Just in case you do not know the history of who this person is, let me tell you. He was one of the Sardars of the Maratha Confederacy. Their descendants are now known by the anglicized versions, the Scindias, but they are actually, their real pronunciation is Shinde. And Maharji Shinde was one of the most interesting characters of 18th century India. He controlled the northern parts of the Maratha Empire. He effectively controlled Delhi and the Mughal emperor for some 2 decades from his hub at Gwalior. And it was he who did a lot of, I mean, it was a very fluid time. The Mughal empire had collapsed. The Marathas themselves were dealing with a fluid situation. The colonial powers, not just the British at that time, the other colonial powers, for example, the French were also active. So many things were going on. And Maharji Shinde was navigating that fluid, turbulent world. So I think it is a good idea that in his name, Maharji Shinde Memorial Lecture on Contemporary Geopolitics will be introduced. And we hope very soon to announce the first in that series, get a good speaker. But as I said, in the spirit of making changes along the way, I also have to remember that it applies to me as well. So here is the announcement of this. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Done? Everything? Oh, there's.
Thank you very much, sir. We are deeply encouraged by this lecture, and we are deeply, personally, I was almost lost by listening to you, all these fascinating ideas and all this. So we, all the faculty mentors, faculty members under sir's guidance, look forward to shape the future reformers, as I have already mentioned earlier. And we are also fascinated by other announcement. I am very sure all the students and all my colleagues are equally, encouraged and excited to join the same. Thank you so much, sir. Now we will formally, the first half of the day has come to an end, and we will proceed for the lunch break, and we will again come back here sharp at 2:50 for the next session, that is the panel discussion on navigating financial stability report, June 2025. Thank you.